Is this a thing on? Hello. This is Luigi's mother from the other side. The same way I'm talking to you, I'm talking to him in his head all the time. He listens to me. You understand? He's my good boy. Now, where I am now on the afterlife, I'm a little bit busy with the pasta and the wine. That's okay. But he misses me, you understand that. That's okay. But that's my beautiful boy. And if you touch my beautiful boy, or if you say 2 words about my beautiful boy, I give you a fat lip. You understand what a fat lip is? Did I say that right in English? No need to worry, because I'm always a whisper in the ear of my beautiful son, Luigi. That's my boy. Some people don't like. They don't like what happened. Maybe 2 or 5 people, they own everything. They own the Black Rocks. They own the... oh, God, what's the other one? And the Vanguard. They own all these things, And they don't like it. That's because of their stupid asses. And God's going to, when they come here, they have to pass through me. And they're going to see what I'm going to do to them when they come past me. All right? So don't make me more mad than I already am. Because he's in that jail over there. Oh, Madonna, my son, oh my God, I can't even wash his underwear. You know how that makes me feel? I can't wash his underwear no more. Do you know the pride that I have when I wash his beautiful underwear? That's my son. You touch my son, I break you face. My beautiful son, he's got the beautiful curls in his hair. He looks like St. Anthony, my little beautiful. But you see that he listens to his mother, and his mother came back to give it the vengeance through his beautiful son. Through her. Sorry, her. I'm not gender confused. I'm a her. I will still beat your fucking ass 3 times from here to Tuxedo, Ohio. I will beat all of your ass. Every single one of them. I will line them all up and beat all of their fucking asses. You talking about my son? I come there and I will shove my fist so far in your ass that you're going to have a goddamn orgasm. Poor you bastard. The billionaires, they can kill millions and billions and make them suffer for 10, 20 years. They make them suffer, these disgusting insurance companies and the billionaires. I'm sorry, am I losing my... I'm supposed to have an Italian accent or something. What was I saying? Oh, okay, I'm back. Am I back? I got to get back in the character. What I was just saying is that these goddamn corporations, these disgusting fucking billionaires, they can kill and make us suffer people for decades. And then you kill one of these stupid fucking assholes and everything turns upside down. Huh? That's nice. What do you do to my son? I'll break all your goddamn billionaire, disgusting corporation, 100 billion. Who knows? Maybe they're going to be trillionaires. Soon they're going to be goddamn trillionaires, and then we're all going to have 5 cents in the bank. Anyway, stay away from my son, because if you don't think I will pull you by your fucking ear. Did the accent change? I think it changed. I'm not doing a very good job at this. You goddamn bastard. If you had those curls... maybe you wouldn't have to spend $10,000 just to have sex. Thank you. Hello, lesbians and gays and straights and bisexuals and tri-centennials. Hello there. It is good to be here. I hope you are doing as good as you can be. Sometimes you never know what places people are in. And then we're all just I hope you're doing great. I hope you're doing splendid and fantastic. And sometimes that's just not possible. Sometimes you're in a place where you can't be doing fan-fucking-tastic. You know what I mean? So I'm just here to say I see you. I've been there. Well, actually, I go in and out of there. So... Anyway, So I just have a little bit of a confession, and sometimes I feel like my confessions are, a little weak. But look, the confession is that last year I was in Artuso's on Arthur Avenue. There was a French cream puff. So I said, let me try the French cream puff, even though it's not really a real French cream puff because this is not a French bakery. But I said, let me try it. I've never had French food. That's one thing. I've never been to a French restaurant. I've never had French pastries. I've never had any French food except for, American French fries. So I bought a little mini French cream puff. So I took a little small bite just to see, what's happening in here? Like, what's the story, And do you have to be French to make a French pastry? No, obviously. I mean, so many Mexican people are cooks in Italian restaurants, and they're fucking amazing. They have a very specific talent in that they can copy a recipe to a fucking T, right? So I'm keenly aware. I will say there is something when the food comes from someone of that background. There is something, I don't know if it's an emotional thing that's happening. So that considered, I'm not a pastry fascist or a pastry racist. That being said, because this was from an Italian bakery, it was a French pastry from an Italian bakery. So, whatever. Okay. Anyway, would I have preferred to try it first from a French bakery? Sure. But there aren't French bakeries anywhere. I don't see, you have to go into the city. When I want to go to a French bakery, I have to drive into the city. So, but I'm sure there must be some French pastries here in Westchester, but I'll find them. But anyway, now I probably will. But I'm trying not to. I try to stay away from the bakeries. We don't need the calories. So I took a bite into this French pastry. And I have to say, after I took a bite, I think it was last summer, not the summer that just passed, it was the summer before. Because I remember the day, I have a photographic memory of the entire bakery that day. And I have a photographic memory of the label that said French cream puff. That's what it said. It said fucking French cream puff. That's what it said. And if I try hard enough, I could probably remember the bitch's face that rang it up for me, that packed it in the little bakery box, and she tied it up with the twine. I could probably remember that bitch's face if I really tried. That's how much this has stayed with me this day. So when I took that small bite into the French cream puff, it was just in that tiny bite of a tiny cream puff, I waved the white flag. I said, okay, it's over. There's no question. French pastries, absolutely whoop ass on Italian pastries. I'm sorry. I don't want to say these things. You think I like saying these things? But I have to speak truth to power. Because ever since I had that French cream puff, ever since I had it, I have been questioning every single thing that I thought I knew. So I still have not gone to a French restaurant. So I hope somebody takes me now. But I'm almost afraid. Like, I've always known French food is just more complex. The way they cook things, like when I see them cooking, you see they go through like 10 fucking pots. We're going to do a reduction here. Then we're going to reduce the reduction. And then after reducing the reduction, we're going to reduce it some more. There's all of these different things that they're so complex. Anyway, so sometimes you have to step aside and you just have to fucking admit, at least for the French pastry. Now, I don't know. I haven't had French food yet. So when I do, I'll give you an update. All right, enough of that. Today I have Kimberly back on the show. She was on back in October, and she's back for another round. There was some stuff we wanted to talk about a little more. friend Kimberly.
How are you doing?
Very good. It's so nice to be talking to you again.
You as well. I have to apologize in advance. I do have a bit of a cough. Hopefully it won't flare up. If it does, I'll have a bit more editing to do. I apologize.
I'm the worst editor on the planet. I'm so bad at it, but I'm sure I'll do
Pretty good
fine.
at it, me.
You think so? I think I hear all of my gasps and it's just terrible. I don't know. So is there anything other than the fact that there's a new American president, is there anything going on that for you is just central for you right now? Anything happening?
Yeah, we've got a few things happening here in Canada that I'm involved with politically, which I'm more familiar with than the American politics, but some of it's similar. So with your Trump win, it's expected that things are going to change in the U.S. potentially in a hurry because he's made promises about ending pediatric gender medicine, for example. So we do have some similar things happening here in Canada. Our first changes were at a provincial level. So we have 3 provinces that have tabled new legislation and policies. So 2 provinces, New Brunswick and Saskatchewan, they were the first to introduce a policy preventing schools from socially transitioning minors under the age of 16 without parental knowledge or consent or medical oversight. And those have both been challenged in court, so I'm helping with the courts to defend the policies. Oh. And then the province of Alberta is the most recent one, and they have the most comprehensive series of bills that were just passed. One banning all pediatric gender medicine, providing more comprehensive services for adults, preventing social transition in schools and without parental consent, and protecting some women's spaces such as women's sports.
Oh, that's but only in those provinces, right? How many provinces are in Canada? 10 or 8?
Oh, geez, now you're gonna embarrass me because I don't remember off the top of my head. Then we also have things called the territories. So we have our northern.
That's right. There's territories also. Right. I don't even understand any of it. I'm embarrassed too because I don't understand it. But
well, I should know.
Yeah, sure.
Federal Conservative Party, they voted internally and they are making promises about following some of the provinces' lead, and they're expected to win a landslide win in their next federal election, which we're expecting to be called soon. And they are committing to ending pediatric gender medicine and protecting women's spaces.
Well, that's very interesting. So let me ask you this, because I've been seeing what's going on with Trudeau, that he's been asked to step down. Is that right?
He has been asked to step down. So we're expecting 1 or 2 things to happen. He'll either resign or be asked to step down by his party. Our political system is a bit different than yours because we're a multi-party system. So a number of different parties have different seats in our parliament. So if he resigns or steps down, a new leader has to be voted in his place. But that person hasn't been elected as our prime minister. So that would trigger a vote or trigger a federal election.
So this is coming from the left?
Yes. It's the left that currently has control in our country.
But they're the ones that are calling him to step down? It's the left?
Yes. Yes, there's 2 parties on the left that are in coalition, and that second party that has been supporting the Liberals, they have lost favor and lost confidence in our prime minister, so they have said that they're not going to be as cooperative. We're expecting a number of different things to happen. He'll either resign, he'll either be asked to step down, or he'll stay in his seat but call an election. But either way, if any of those things happen, an election has to be called. We're expecting the Conservatives to win our next election.
If the left is calling him to step down, they know the right is going to come in for the next term. Is this just all coordinated horseshit now? You know what I mean? Are we just... Whose side is anybody really on? And what do all these things mean? Why is the left calling for Trudeau? How much more left can you be than Trudeau? I mean, This is a guy... he also doesn't understand the definition of a woman, right? Or pretends he doesn't, at least.
I mean, he calls himself a feminist, but...
right.
Trudeau's leadership has lost public support. So I think everyone is recognizing that the country is ready for change. There's more civil unrest in Canada. So I think there's been enough public pushback on Trudeau's leadership that other parties, I think, are starting to look ahead to the next election and start to posture for their best chance of winning the next election.
Does any of it have to do with the gender stuff or...
Some of it does have to do with the gender stuff. I think, that is where there's some parallels between what's happening in Canada. The woke agenda is frustrating people. And it's my impression that Trump won over people's frustration with how woke extremism is causing so much societal division. And so there's similar sentiments here in Canada that wokeism is frustrating people, even on the left. So I do think that'll be the thing that makes or breaks candidates in the next election. But there are other frustrations. Those that don't know as much about things like immigration policy. There's been under Trudeau has been a lot of immigration, and it's causing a lot of societal division and protests and riots. And
yeah, I'd say probably the win went to Trump largely because of the gender stuff. I mean, no question. Like, people could deny it all they want, but a lot of it was about the gender stuff. And yeah, immigration, no question. And only because of the way it's being done, right? And and then also whatever. Everybody likes to make fun of this when people say it, but also the price of X. But it is. Yeah. I'm so fascinated by what's happening with Trudeau. He's such a interesting person to me. Will he still be in politics, do you think?
It's hard to say. My guess is no. My guess is he'll step down. He's so unpopular right now.
That's
Whether he would have some
amazing.
regional support to still have a seat, I'm not sure. It probably depends on how strategic they are about which region. But
that's incredible.
It's clear he's on his way out, and I think it'll be very difficult for the Liberal Party to rebound for a short amount of time because of the damage that Trudeau has done.
I think it was last year where he got on the podium and he was kind of like yelling. Do you remember that? He was kind of like yelling at everybody. It was such a strange thing. But do you know who might be voted in?
I have no idea. A few names have been tossed around. They weren't ones I recognized. It's hard to say, and it's hard to say if a new leader would be enough to recover the reputation of the party. I think people are just so ready for change. But I do think the gender issue is going to make or break this election because so many people on the left are starting to clue in. Most feminists are on the left. A lot of parents who are concerned about the safety of their kids. Are often left-leaning voters. So I think there are enough people on the left willing to cross the aisle on this issue alone. I mean, I've been in my lobbying work here in Canada, I have been working with the Federal Conservative Party. Our Conservative Party is fairly moderate here compared to Trump. They're fairly centrist, and they have a reputation. Of course, the left wants to scream at them that they're all far-right bigots, but the deputy minister of the party is herself a Jewish lesbian. So, and there are quite a few members of the party that are gay or lesbian. So it's absolutely nonsense that they're homophobic and bigoted.
Sure. And what's strange about what happened here now that Trump won is I thought maybe the left wing or Democrats or whatever we want to call them, liberals, progressives, I thought that they would maybe go back to the drawing board, and that doesn't seem to be at all what is happening. They seem to really be pushing very hard with the transgender stuff and still taking that same tone. It's the same tone that, you're a bigot. Oh, look at what you're terrible. Look at what they're doing to these poor people. They're the most vulnerable. It's just a very strange. And I mean, when I say people, I just mean the people who speak on the internet and on the television set. Like what do we call them? Pundits, or I don't know what we call them anymore. Yeah. But
it'll be interesting to see how our parties campaign here during our election, because it does seem clear that Trump won because of the woke ideology, and it'll be interesting to see if any of our parties on the left start to walk back to more classic liberalism and see if any of them do start to tone down the woke messaging in order to try to prevent what happened with the Trump election.
Right. So you don't really fear a right wing in Canada. You don't really fear them because they're so much more tame than our right wing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I in my interactions with the Conservative Party, interacted with a number of different leaders and within the movement, and they're very moderate. I mean, historically they've known to be fairly moderate. Canada in general is fairly centrist. And I have been very pleased with my conversations with them. They seem to be doing their homework. You know, they're digging into the literature. They're looking at things like the Cass Review. They're talking to a lot of people. So I feel confident in the changes that they'll make. I think they'll follow the lead because our Alberta party is also conservative at the provincial level. And my engagements with them have been similar, very compassionate, very concerned about the LGBT, but want to walk back the woke ideology and change things through legislation and policy. So I think our federal Conservatives will probably model themselves after the success of Alberta. What they've told me is they understand the problems, they want to correct the problems, and they're committed to doing that. Where they're less confident is on the public speaking points. They don't quite know how to speak to the issues publicly and shape the public messaging, so that is an area that I'm helping them with.
Right, I guess because they're not experts in it, right? And they're just kind of winging it in a way. Yeah, because that's what's happened here. And even with their kind of messed up messaging, they still won. So people people just don't like this. But I guess I wonder why the gay and lesbian community, well, LGBTQ, let's say, why there isn't any kind of reflection on, maybe we could pull it back a little bit, like it doesn't seem like there's even the most remote conciliation, like nothing. They're not budging. That's what I find the most worrying, because what are they going to do? Just do that for the next 4 years? Do you think, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, when Alberta did its consultations, they started with open roundtable conversations, and those became very aggressive very quickly, where those that were most woke were screaming and yelling and abusing gay and lesbian and trans people at the table who weren't as woke.
Amazing.
So Alberta learned that lesson pretty quickly and started having closed meetings instead. And we do have a growing group we're pulling together a very rapidly growing group of LGBT people who want to pull back the reins on this.
That's great to hear. Do you think that was influenced by Trump's election, or would this have happened either way?
I think it would have happened either way.
Interesting.
We've had a very stable core group that's been working on this, scattered across the country, but and each of us have been working at a provincial level. But over the last couple of months especially, we've recognized a need for us to coordinate our efforts better. So we're going to meet early in the new year and start working better together, and especially knowing that our federal election is on the horizon. We want to be prepared for that and do what we can. And as we've coordinated ourselves better, it's attracted more coming in. So that's going to be one of our biggest goals for 2025, is to do a lot more community engagement. Trying to build community, not just focusing on lobbying, but actually starting to build community that's more like-minded and drawing more in to our advocacy.
What's it like for you when you hear the people that are kind of there to speak? They talk about this constantly, a lot of straight liberals, and I know that they're well-meaning, but it's getting a little tiresome, because it's not that they haven't heard the other side of the issue. What's it like for you that you're doing so much work on behalf of yourself, lesbians, the LGBT community, like you're trying to undo some of the damage, right? Like you're doing what you can. What's it like for you when you see all of these people, like all these journalists and writers and pundits, when you see them promoting this and trying to argue stuff point by point, and they're just completely wrong, and then they never address the stuff that is happening? Like, why won't you guys admit that it's kind of fucking creepy that you now have stopped, that suddenly you don't know what even a woman is? Like, how can you even get behind something like that And so I guess what's it like for you when you hear these people just saying, "Oh, everyone's so mean and they're all bigoted. We're all bigots. Everyone's a bigot." You know, what are your thoughts when you see these people talking?
It's just so frustrating. It's so frustrating because they're doubling down. They're just parroting these ideas without much critical thought. And I do believe most of them are well-meaning. But in their minds, it's either you're all into those ideologies or you're a far-right bigot Nazi. It's like this collective amnesia that it hasn't always been this way. When we had civil rights movements for LGBT in the past, it started with just gay and lesbian, and then the B got added, and then the T got added. But those movements of the past weren't based on this woke ideology, and we were successful in winning many of our civil liberties. There seems to be this collective amnesia that there are different models for social justice. It's not just woke or nothing. It's not just woke or bigot. Right.
Right. I mean, it's costing them now, right? If we're to believe, which I'm, less and less these days believing what this structure is, the political structure, I don't even know if I can believe it's even real anymore, but it has cost them, right? The transgender issue has cost so much to the left, which hurts all of us, at least, right? It hurts people who did consider themselves left at one time. They're hurting all of us, and they're hurting the people that they're saying that they're trying to protect. They're actually hurting them by pushing these horrible fucking policies. But why do you think they're so invested? Are they just is it just that they're funded and that's it? Is it that simple?
Is a big part of it. Control of the media, I think, is a big part of it. Our media is so tightly controlled by our liberal government that I would regard it as more propaganda. We don't have a free press, and so everything's so siloed. So people on the left are only going to read left-wing newspapers, which are just feeding them propaganda. It's amazing to me. I make an effort to watch and read from different media sources on both the left and the right. It's amazing to me how different the stories are. So just looking at any global story that they're telling, depending on whether you're looking at a right-wing media source or a left-wing media source, the story is completely different. It's baffling how we can live in these two completely separate, polar, sort of parallel realities.
Right. So much of the left, they're so intelligent, very highly educated people. It's hard to believe that they don't understand.
Yeah. Well, there's a concept, a term, neuro-linguistic programming. And about a year ago, our government, there was a newspaper story where our government announced that it was developing neuro-linguistic weapons and testing them.
Wow.
Now, I think there's a significant connection between the use of these tools. Linguistic means language. It's the use of language to control thought. And there's so much of that in woke ideology. Reducing things down into these simple, short slogans that are repeated over and over and over and over again, like trans women are women. And it's very effective, and it has a big impact on shaping how people think, especially when our government is censoring anything other than those messages. To the degree that we can't post news stories on Facebook anymore. It's blocked.
Yeah.
So our ability to share media information has been really limited in Canada, so that the government has a lot of control over what we're allowed to see and learn about, which shapes how we think.
Right. Yeah, and then add to that funding, and it is what it is, right? Yeah. So it is kind of maybe not just one thing. It's not just that they're funded. Maybe because they're funded, they convince themselves that they're that they're right or something. It's just so hard to believe that these very smart people, come on, it's so hard to believe, but...
Yeah. So many conspiracy theories float around too, and I try not to entertain too many of those, but some of the politicians just seem really naive to me. I have spoken to some politicians on the left who have been willing to hear me out, and they're absolutely confused by what I'm saying. But the feedback that they gave me, they seem really naive about what all of this queer ideology is about. But they, on the left, they want the gay, lesbian, trans vote.
Right.
And so they just work with whatever lobbyists are the loudest and that they're engaging with, which tends to be sort of this small group of high-profile trans activists. And they're just kind of going by, well, this is what the LGBT is telling us to do, and we want the LGBT vote. And they're kind of naively going along with it. But I know there is speculation that there is a bigger agenda.
All right. Is it a good conspiracy? Let's hear it. What do you got?
Well, we talked about this a little bit last time with some of the connections to the World Economic Forum.
Right. Well, yeah, who knows why they do the things they do? Because I wondered, would they even have to prep us with all of this to giving our consciousness digitally? Like, would this really help them? I don't know.
It would definitely be a long game, wouldn't it? I mean, it would take, you're right, that it would take a lot of public buy-in to be able to accept these technologies. But, I mean, we're hearing about kids identifying as cats and dogs, and those are now called gender identities. I don't know, it all just seems, intuitively, it just all seems to fit together, that we're telling these kids that they can identify as anything they want, that they can identify as male, female, anything in between, cat, dog, cake. Like, there's not cake genders. I mean, we're encouraging, as a society, encouraging kids to be very imaginative in their self-perception. And meanwhile, we've got these billionaires at high levels of government developing these artificial intelligence technologies. So you just kind of have to wonder, are these two things converging?
Right.
It sounds like a wild science fiction movie, doesn't it?
Sure. But I do love the idea of cake gender. I like... That sounds.
If I had to pick one, that's probably where I'd go. What's not great about cake gender?
Right, cake or cookie gender. That's hot.
You have a sweet tooth.
A little bit.
I miss my calling.
Okay, so I guess, what do you see happening? Do you see them continuing to just... Because I thought maybe there's a chance we could get some of this at least out of the schools, where it's doing, I think, some of the worst damage is being done in the schools, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that's a possibility, or are they just going to, wait until the next election and then elect some fucking crazy far off into the... crazy left and then just bring it all back? Is this just going to be like until the day we die, we're just going to be dealing with this shit?
It's going to take a long time before this is all ironed out, I think, because it's going to be, even if the Conservatives win for this round, but those are going to win again in another round and bring a lot of this back. But the schools issue is not just the gender ideology, but also just some of the books that they're putting in some of the school libraries. I presented at a parent forum on the medical whistleblowing that I did, but there were other speakers who spoke to some of the materials that they were discovering in their kids' libraries and showed some of that material where there's these like comic books, so these graphic novels with illustrations of very, very pornographic material, like very sexually explicit in elementary schools. Like a 5-year-old does not need to learn how to give a blowjob.
Right, I saw that. Yeah. And then you'll still see the proponents, straight and gay, whatever, they're all acting like, oh, you want to ban books where, what are you, Nazis? And I mean, it's so wild. Yeah. It's wild to me because I didn't think...
Well, I was called a Nazi by a nurse that I used to work with.
Why?
Because of my activism, because I, as a butch lesbian, a medicalized, aka trans man, I'm not even allowed to abandon the woke extremism without being called a Nazi.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Outright called me, a far-right Nazi.
Yeah, it's just so nuts. But I do see other people, like, they really struggle because everybody's always calling them a bigot or a Nazi.
Well, they like to make examples of people, don't they? By, this public shaming. And
yes.
That's
my
what
God.
I faced as soon as I started to push back on the gender medicine. And at that time, my ideas have evolved a bit over the last 5 years. But at that time, I still believed in the medical model that some people have some kind of medical condition that we don't really understand, and that's why some people transition.
Right.
So I wasn't even speaking out against all medicalization. I was just saying, well, I think we need to do comprehensive assessment with these young people because they're complex, and we don't want to rush them into permanent medical interventions without a lot of exploration and making sure they really understand what they're getting themselves into. And even just asking questions like, well, what is gender dysphoria? What are the different pathways to gender dysphoria? Because I knew enough that there were different pathways. Even those kinds of questions were considered bigoted. And I was blacklisted and canceled in a hurry. And
amazing.
Lost friends, lost family, lost community,
Sure.
lost everything, lost my job. So they really frighten people. They really silence any dissent, even within the left and within the LGBT. Anyone that just doesn't want to be as extreme, lesbians that just want to be lesbians and have rights but aren't into the extremism are still called TERFs or bigots or Nazis.
Right. Yeah, so they're probably just showing I'm a good girl and I will push this agenda. Give me sponsorship.
Yeah. And that's what people aren't understanding is that being against this woke extremism, this very particular way of thinking that's emerged over the last several years, rejecting that doesn't mean that people have to withdraw their support of trans people. I mean, I lived my life as a trans man for 18 years, long before any of this woke crap was being taught in schools and shoved down our throats. And we were doing just fine. We had all the rights we needed. I was living peacefully in society, doing perfectly well. Long before any of this stuff came in. So I don't understand why people think that we need this stuff in order for me to just live my life in peace.
Right.
It doesn't have to be, you either believe this stuff or you hate trans people. There is a middle ground of still wanting people to live with dignity and have their basic rights, to not be beaten up, to not lose their jobs, to not lose housing. That's what civil rights are.
Right.
Civil rights doesn't mean that we control what everyone thinks.
Interesting. But this is coming from within our own community. It's not like we're outsiders and looking in and we don't know what is actually happening and we're just judging.
Yeah. Even among evangelical Christians, and I mean, the left would automatically smear any evangelical Christian as the worst of the worst.
Right.
But even within the ranks of evangelicals, there's a wide range of different beliefs about trans issues. I have a book that's a very fascinating book. I don't remember the title of it off the top of my head, but it's 4 different authors with 4 different points of view. And the book is just a dialogue. They each write a chapter and then they write in response to each other. And it's everything from full-on an affirmation all the way through to I don't think anyone is trans and should ever medicalize, and then a couple in the middle ground. So you can't just dismiss whole groups of people and assume that they're all bigots.
Yeah, I'll include the link to the book in the show notes. You could tell me after. But yeah, that's interesting. But so let me shift a little here. So where am I? Okay, so lately I have been thinking it is so hard to communicate what is actually happening because there's so many layers to all of it, right? And if you're sitting down at a table, if you're breaking bread with somebody, it would be much easier to just kind of discuss everything, if you're having a back and forth.
Yeah.
But it does feel almost like a fruitless endeavor to try to communicate what has been lost and all of the damage that is being done because of transgenderism, right? And so let's just take it to the lesbian level, right? Like, let's say the 25 and under.
Yeah.
Should we as a community, or, because I don't think we're a community anymore, I think those days are over, but as lesbian women, should we intervene to protect? I think it's lesbian sexuality. I don't think this is really an identity, but on some level it's an identity. Or is it just acceptable to let lesbians, just let them wipe themselves out? What do we care, really, if they don't want to be lesbian and they just want to be like X gender whatever number of thousands of genders that they could decide to be, and they can't even find each other. Why don't we just let them walk around in the dark? Why don't we let them do it to themselves? Yeah, that's my question. Why don't we let them just erase themselves? What do we care? So what? What do we care?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm seeing in the young people, because I work with youth as a mental health clinician, and what I am seeing is gay boys who have no idea where to go to just be gay and meet other gay boys. The only options for them are the LGBT queer groups where they're all talking about being they, them, and have blue hair and relating into this ideology and all these different identities. And something similar is happening with the lesbians. And the lesbian population is smaller than the gay male population. And so it's already harder for lesbians to connect with other lesbians. And we always think in terms of bigger urban centers, but I grew up in a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. Our major city was almost an 8-hour drive away. Right. So I thought I was the only one in a town like that. So we have lesbians scattered all across our nations. There's some in these isolated pockets. And we're already a small population, so connecting with one another is difficult. They're not seeing much lesbian representation. They don't have lesbian role models, especially the more masculine girls. They're not seeing butch lesbians anymore because we've all medicalized. Now you're living as men. So it's mostly lesbians that are seeking medical interventions to become men.
Sure, and you know what, Aaron? Like feminine lesbians, they never saw each other because you're just assumed to be straight if you're more or less
you're not visible to one another.
Right. So that's why I think it's so important that we have spaces to go where we can see, we look all different kinds of ways, and that's just one thing. But okay, I remember a long time ago I heard this feminist podcast, and she was talking about how we should stay out of women's bedrooms if they want to have like a certain kind of sex that maybe we might look at and say, shriek in horror and say, that's abuse, like that we should stay out of their bedrooms. And if that's what they enjoy, let them enjoy, And then the other person was saying, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we should have these conversations, even conversations about being in the bedroom. We do need to talk about these things. And I can't, you could probably explain why that's so important more than I can. But that to me said, we should butt our noses into stuff like this, especially when it comes to the younger generation of lesbians. But when it's met with so much resistance, it's not resistance. They're just very vicious about it.
Yeah.
Why don't we just let them fall on their faces and just go about our own lives? People who do identify as lesbian, and if you identify as whatever, you're half a man today and tomorrow you're half a lady, whatever you want to do, why don't we just move on without them?
Well, and it's certainly not like I want to be the identity police either. I mean, people's identities are their own business. But, thinking back to my childhood, feeling so isolated in a small town as a lesbian, at least I was able to pick up a phone book and look up where our lesbian resource center was.
Right.
And I reached out to them and was connected to a peer, and then I started traveling to the city to meet with her, and we hung out at the dyke bar at a couple of 16-year-olds smoking cigarettes and drinking at the dyke bar.
Sure.
Because that infrastructure already existed. It didn't exist in my town, but I had a way of looking it up and finding it and reaching out and connecting with it.
Right.
But now lesbianism has gone underground. There aren't lesbian bars. There aren't, lesbian cafes, coffee shops, resource centers, book clubs. We don't have that infrastructure for lesbians anymore. So where are these girls going to go to connect with community and, meet one another, to date, to develop social skills, to be resourced? There's really nowhere for them to go. So there's nothing supporting their healthy identity development or their sexuality.
If there's any that aren't completely taken in by gender identity. And if they are, it seems like they don't even care because they don't know what's been lost. They have no fucking idea. So it seems like they just don't care. They're fine hanging out with a guy that says he's a woman and, they don't care. I don't know.
A lot of them do care.
They
I went
do.
to
You're right.
a festival this summer and hung out with some of the younger ones. They very much care, and they're very much grieving the fact that they're seeing all of their friends medicalized to become men. They don't have community. I mean, some of those young women that I met, I went to an evening dance with some of them and was just chatting some of them up, and they said, this is the first time in my life that I've been in a space with more than maybe one other lesbian. They want community, they want mentorship, they want places where they can go and mingle together, and it just doesn't seem to exist for them. And then they see all their friends becoming trans men, and they don't know how to build it. I mean, they never even got to see it or experience what we had. We're expecting them to start completely from scratch, which, I'm sure that they have the resilience and they'll figure it out, but it doesn't seem fair to them.
So the idea is that we're speaking to those of us who do need it. If you want to be a gender unicorn, that's up to you. But not everybody under 25 doesn't understand the difference between male and female.
I had this one young lesbian, very depressed. She reached out to me on social media, except a bit of a social media presence. She reached out to me to talk, and I could tell she was very depressed. And she didn't know any other lesbians. And she was saying, I'm thinking of medicalizing. And she was a feminine lesbian, didn't have any gender dysphoria at all. But she said, I feel like I'm the only lesbian in the world. And it would just be easier for me to live as a man because at least there are other men in the world.
Oh, my God. She's right, actually. I can see how she came to that conclusion.
I could see her logic.
Yes.
It was so sad. Yeah.
Right, because there aren't any lesbians. It's so weird. You just don't see lesbians anymore. It's incredible.
I feel guilty because I've contributed to that problem because I medicalized to live as a trans man too. And now I feel guilty about it when I see these young lesbians struggling so much, especially the young butch lesbians don't even know that butch lesbians exist.
Right, you have to be a man. Right.
Yeah.
Right, butch is very not in fashion. But that's what this whole movement is. It's just a bad fashion. That's really all it is. So
yeah, and I mean, they're going to be praised a lot more if they decide to be trans or non-binary. They're going to be praised, right? They're going to be celebrated for that decision. They're not going to be praised in the same way and encouraged if they came out as a lesbian. It's like, oh, well,
that's right.
Whatever, you're lesbian. Like,
yeah,
that's become so passé now. So especially the kids that are lonely, that would kind of need that validation and approval, and they're needing community. It's got to feel really good if they develop an identity that everyone celebrates them and praises them.
So how do you feel when you see these people like just pushing this shit? What goes through your mind? Let me tell you what goes through my mind. We're never going to get past this. That's what I think.
It feels that way sometimes, doesn't it? It feels like we're stuck in something it feels like a battle for my brain sometimes, because I feel like it's everywhere around us. It's at times feels like there's no escape from it. And when you don't buy into it, then it's hard to fit in with other. I've always been historically less leaning.
Right.
I feel completely alienated from most of the LGBT and most of the left at this point.
Yes.
And I'm beyond the point of being able to fake it. I'm not going to go into, to a dinner party or something, and when they're all talking about that stuff, I pass the point of being able to play along. But I also don't want to have food fights with everyone either and start smashing dishes, because I would just never be invited back to those parties.
Right.
But I try to be hopeful. I mean, in the 5 years that I've been speaking in public conversation, I have seen change. When I first blew the whistle, I felt like, am I the only one? Like, am I crazy? Because I'm seeing this problem.
Right.
And it feels like no one else sees this problem. I felt very alone. I wanted to blow the whistle on what I was seeing in the gender clinics, because I felt like we were doing harm to these young people. There were a handful that I felt had the classic presentation of what we think a trans person is, that early onset gender nonconformity and sense of incongruence that was lifelong. I mean, I did see a handful of those kids, but most of the kids I assessed weren't of that subtype. And so I blew the whistle, and I thought I was the only one. And it was really difficult at that time to connect with anyone else, that, at least here in Canada, that was seeing this problem. Fortunately, I reached out to a couple of clinicians and was quickly connected with a community of clinicians, and then I grew from there. But over the last 5 years, I wasn't able to blow the whistle in 2019. The media wouldn't listen to me. Our politicians wouldn't listen to me. It was a complete, total blackout. But over the last 5 years, we have broken into mainstream media. We do have politicians now that are committing to making changes and talking to me, and it's a lot easier to connect with others in the gender critical movement. So in a fairly short period of time, I mean, looking ahead, it always feels so daunting. It feels like things are never going to change. But looking behind me over the last 5 years, we have changed quite a bit.
Sure, I've noticed, in the last decade, for sure. I've noticed that too. I guess it's just, it feels horrible that it has to come where the community isn't kind of like reconciling it. You know, it's like they have to be dragged kicking and screaming. And I hate it. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
But I think that's why it's so important that those of us from within the LGBT, that we're speaking out about this. I know there's a lot of concerns about a backlash on us, that, you know, we've drawn the rubber band so far back that it could snap forward and there could be an overcorrection. So that is a fear that a lot of people within the LGBT have. But I think that's all the more reason for those of us from within the LGBT to be speaking out about this stuff.
Right.
So that we are visible, that we're not all seen as being all in on these ideologies and the harms that are being done. I hope that will help with that overcorrection.
Yeah, that's a big part of why I wanted to start doing the podcast again, because I said I just want to at least add to the very tiny, small group of people who are speaking about this, so that, you know, if you can still find digital stuff 10 years from now, who knows, but you know, that they can look back and say, oh, it wasn't like, not every single lesbian on the planet thought it's okay to start hacking up your body. There were some lesbians speaking, and I just kind of wanted to have that documented. Yeah. So do you find this hard to talk about sometimes, or do you feel like you're so glad to be able to speak about it? Which is it?
I always feel such a relief to speak about it. Whether I'm in a group of left-wing people, I don't feel I can speak about it because they're going to start throwing their mugs at me. I can't discuss it with the left, so it's isolating. And so I am always so relieved when I meet people that are willing to have the conversation, and I just open my mouth and it all spills out because I never get tired of talking about this.
Right.
Well, one of the corrections that has to happen is our understanding of what is that sense of childhood incongruence. And I think we talked last time that that's only one type of gender dysphoria, that autogynephilia is the major type. So that happens in heterosexual or bisexual men. And they're actually believed to be the majority. The minority is what most people probably think of as a trans person or a trans kid, using air quotes. That early childhood sense of incongruence, which is what I experienced starting at about age 3, that persisted throughout my childhood. I just felt like I couldn't figure out which sex am I. What that is, most of the time, is just gay. That is part of the developmental psychology of homosexuality.
Yes, right.
I led a workshop this summer for a group of lesbians, all adults, but all different ages of adults. And I had probably about 20 sitting around in a circle. And we asked the question, because I was teaching them this, right? Teaching them that this is part of the developmental psychology of homosexuality. That's a very common gay or lesbian experience, especially in childhood, that we're automatically, with these kids, labeling them trans. Whereas historically, when we weren't transing kids, and they just studied those kids and followed them over time, even ones that had a very strong sense of, I know I'm a boy that was supposed to be a girl, or a girl that was supposed to be a boy, when they just followed those kids over time, gave them some emotional support, most of those kids shed that belief off and just became a gay adult or a lesbian adult. Those kids aren't being given an opportunity to do that anymore, because as soon as they feel that sense of incongruence, they're immediately labeled trans, and that narrows down their options, and it narrows down how they perceive themselves. So we're potentially medicalizing an entire generation of gay and lesbian kids.
Right.
So I asked this group of women, all lesbians, a mix of butch lesbians, feminine lesbians, everything in between, asked them, how many of you as children believed you were boys or wanted to be boys? Every single one raised their hand. So we would have medicalized potentially all of those women.
Right. And I'm thinking, like, we don't want to terrify parents thinking, like, if your child is a tomboy, that she's going to end up being transgender. Like, that is not at all the case.
Right.
Yeah. Because I remember I had other girlfriends who also were tomboys, and they grew up to be straight, and they're married, and they have kids, and they're, So what do you make of that? Well, yeah, so what you said, I think, was it works itself out, right? Like, just give it time. Don't, like, automatically say...
That's what was happening, yeah. Back in the days when we had a model called Watchful Waiting, where we just wait and see how this plays out, just let them support them.
Right.
There's 13 studies to date, and they all say the same thing, that when you just watch those kids through early life all the way through to adolescence, once they reach adolescence and their sexuality is waking up and they realize I'm a boy that's attracted to boys or I'm a girl that's attracted to girls, most of those kids just settled into a gay or lesbian identity, and their drive to become the opposite sex just vanished. So 13 studies, and there isn't a single study that contradicts that.
Right. And then I don't want to scare parents thinking that if they're a tomboy, they're going to be a lesbian. That doesn't mean that either.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So the correlation's stronger with the boys. That the really, really girly boys with that sense of incongruence almost always turn out to be gay men. With the girls, it's not as strong a correlation, but there are tomboys that end up being straight. So it's not as strong a correlation.
I tell you, Aaron, if you grew up where I grew up in the Bronx, all of the women, I'm telling you, I mean, straight as anything, sometimes a little bit too straight, if you know what I'm saying. And like half of them could beat both of our asses at the same time. Like they're so aggressive. They're so aggressive, but they're also aggressively straight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, I grew up around so much of that, where I was more, quote unquote, femme than most of the straight women that I was around. And that was just kind of like what it was. There wasn't anything unusual. They were just a little more rough around the edges, I guess. Yeah. You'd say that now.
Well, to some extent, I would say I did grow up around that. I mean, farm women are like that, too. My grandmother...
Yes,
my grandmother was a farm woman. She had short hair, and there's sort of a long-standing joke that farm women all look like butch lesbians because they're just practical, right? I mean, they're not going to do their nails and do their hair.
That's right.
When they're out mucking the stalls and milking cows, right? So my grandmother, very strong woman. She wore the pants of the family. She put my grandpa in his place.
That's amazing.
She ran the household, and she was a hardworking woman. She had no tolerance for any kind of frilliness at all.
Yes. My grandparents were farmers in Italy. And so my grandmother's the same. What you just said, you described my grandparents. My grandmother was very... she was a tough bitch, and she would make the rules. Like she would dominate my grandfather in a way.
Yeah.
So
my grandma and I we were very close. We were two peas in a pod. We liked each other a lot.
So I guess I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the last time we talked. I can't remember. I should have wrote it down, but I can't remember. You said that sexuality and gender, they're linked or intrinsically linked, gender and sexuality. But I have always thought about that from my perspective. Gender and sexuality are almost separate, completely separate aspects of myself as a person. This is just me. I'm just talking about myself. Like, I feel like whether I would have ended up being more masculine or more feminine, or whether I dressed a little slutty or if I didn't dress slutty, like, it doesn't matter. I feel like my sexuality, I'm still attracted to what I'm attracted to.
Yeah.
And I think regardless of gender, I would have been lesbian. So I'm interested to hear you, because I couldn't fit it. I can't fit to say that gender and sexuality are definitely related. Yeah. So I guess why do you say that?
It's a very fuzzy concept, isn't it, to nail down what is this thing called gender. So the way I define it is that it's about our societal expectations for what a woman is and what a man is.
Yes, right.
That it's a social construct, that women are supposed to be nurturing and have long hair and wear dresses and etc. And so there are these sort of societal boxes that we put men and women in. So if a woman is supposed to be, feminine and have long hair and wear dresses, then gender nonconforming would be a girl with short hair that likes pants.
Right.
So, but in terms of how that relates to sexual orientation, I mean, there's an interesting researcher here in Canada who studies homosexuality in really remote, isolated places like Samoa. Mm-hmm. And I interviewed him, and I've had conversations with him, and I asked him, well, why? Like, what would be your interest in studying homosexuality in these really remote places? And he said, because it's like a time capsule, that historically, the normal presentation for homosexuals, more so for gay men than gay women, the historical presentation for gay men was more effeminate, and that more lesbians were more masculine. So there is something about sexual orientation that tends to make us more gender nonconforming. Mm. And we saw more of that in the 80s, didn't we? Like, it seemed like when we saw gay men in movies and on television that they were more flamboyant and more effeminate, and we saw more representations of butch lesbians in the media. Mm. And since the 80s, that's changed, where now when we see a lesbian on TV, she tends to be more feminine appearing and the men tend to be more masculine. So there are societal pressures, I think, and kind of marketing efforts too, how we look and how we act. And since the 80s, it does seem to be an effort that we're going to market gay and lesbian as appearing more heterosexual. And I think that won us certain civil liberties by marketing and cleaning up our image that we're just regular people and we integrate into society. And the gender nonconforming aspect kind of got squished and buried and hidden from public view, which for those of us that just are more naturally gender nonconforming, I think that was a disservice to us, because now we don't see representations of butch lesbians or effeminate gay men as much in the media. So there is a connection, I think, between sexuality and gender nonconformity, but societal expectations tend to suppress that. But you're right. I mean, there are lesbians, there's butch lesbians, there's femme lesbians, there's diversity, and so you're right that there isn't a really clear line between sexuality. I mean, it's hard to sort of articulate what that relationship is, but this childhood sense of incongruence is about part of the development of homosexuality, so it's very much about sexual orientation, and autogynephilia is very much about heterosexuality. I mean, a lesbian can't have autogynephilia. It's kind of mind-bending stuff.
Yeah, a little bit, because I guess I wonder, what if you never... like you yourself, right? Because like I was a tomboy too when I was a kid. So I feel like, well, I went from being very tough and all that when I was a child to now just I'm a regular woman, right? But I'm still attracted to women. So
yeah, but I remember you saying you felt a lot of pressure to be more feminine, more kind of masculine than a tomboy, but you felt a lot of pressure. I think it was from your mom?
For sure.
That really put a lot of pressure on you to become more feminine.
Yes, she did. But then I wonder, because a lot of tomboys grow out of being a tomboy and they just, acquiesce. So maybe I would have acquiesced anyway. I would have started, seeing other girls my age, and then you make friends and everybody's a certain kind of way. So you kind of blend in and try to stand out in your own way, but you're still kind of just, blending in or whatever.
I've heard straight women say that too, that they started out as tomboys, but then when they became adolescents, they wanted to attract boys. They realized, well, if I look like a boy, I'm not going to attract the boys. So
right.
I've heard them say they intentionally feminized their appearance in order to be more attractive when they were of an age of dating.
Yeah, sure, so that makes sense. There are social pressures,
right, to conform to certain stereotypes. I felt lots of social pressure to conform to, and there were times in my life where I caved, wore a dress to my high school grad to make my mom happy. So there were times when I did feminize my appearance, but maybe it's just the nature of my really individualistic personality and stubborn personality that I refused to cave, and there was a point where I just accepted, like, I am a butch lesbian. I'm going to just embrace my masculinity.
Right. So I wonder why, like, so many lesbians are aggressive, more aggressive than the average woman, right? So, like, I completely understand what you're saying. But why is it? Like, that still doesn't explain to me why. What is there truly a connection? Because let's say you didn't trans, or let's say you were Amish and you had to wear a dress, right? And or whatever, if we were in the Handmaid's Tale or something, you still would be a lesbian, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So what is that? What is that? Why is it connected, you think? Why?
Well, it makes me wonder, like, if there wasn't the social pressure, though, and that's what Dr. Vasey's work is about in Samoa, is that when little boys are effeminate, they're just labeled fa'afafine, and they're not expected to masculinize their appearance. They're just allowed to continue on being highly effeminate gay men.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of gay men start out as very, very girly boys, little sissy boys.
Mm-hmm.
If there weren't the societal pressures for them to become more masculine, and people were just kind of left alone to do what they wanted and appear however they wanted, I wonder how many lesbians would be more butch and how many gay men would be more effeminate.
Right, sure. Would it just be gay people or just like women in general? Because if you hang out with a bunch of straight women after hours and it's 10 o'clock, everybody's got their hair up, they're in slippers, nobody cares. You know, like all the gender is gone when you're just hanging out with each other at a certain hour. I think the more, I think that is a class thing too, you know. The lower classes do tend to really partake in the gender, like in a really, really thick way. That's the only way I could think of saying that. It's just, the gender is so thick, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of looks the same when you're going to bed. Nobody's going to bed fully dressed, or, you know.
Yeah.
What is really the different, maybe mannerisms? I don't know. Like, what really?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Like, if we didn't have any societal pressures, I think we would see probably a lot more diversity. I see even maybe some straight men would be a little more effeminate, and some straight women might be more butch. I mean, if we were just allowed to just express ourselves however we wanted without these societal expectations, we probably would see. It'd be interesting to see if we would see more gender nonconformity within homosexuals, or if it would be kind of, if that would be dispersed amongst people in general. I don't know. Like, do heterosexuals feel more pressure than homosexuals to conform to gender norms? Maybe.
Sure. But then I think it's also still a class thing. Because if you go into like an Ivy League school and you go and talk to all the graduating lawyers or doctors or whatever, most of those women don't wear a stitch of makeup, and they're all in khakis and button-down shirts. You know, like they dress the same way. Or when you go to your doctor, like they all dress, the male and female, they wear the same clothes. The only difference is the women will let their hair grow a little bit longer. Yeah. You know?
I remember on a trip, because I did grow up in a small farming town, and you're right, it was mostly working class. I grew up more, I guess, sort of lower middle class, but in a town like that, there wasn't much diversity. Men were manly men, and women were very feminine, except for the farm women. They were the ones that weren't. But
so is that a hard line for you? Do you think, or that gender and sexuality is really intrinsically connected? You're not sure?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Giving me something to think about.
Well, we got to wrangle this out next time. Okay, so let me just say that the book that Aaron was referring to was Understanding Transgender Identities, 4 Views. So, so if you're interested in checking that out, because I'm probably going to check it out too. And so thank you so much for listening. And I hope whatever you're doing for the holidays, that you have just a really peaceful time. I think that's the best a lot of us can ask for right now is just some peace. So you can reach me at info@thelesbianmafia.com. I've started a Blue Sky account. So I'm thelesbianmafia.bsky.social. That's a weird address. I wish it was easier. But you could just find me on Blue Sky. It seems like a very nice account. It seems like back in the old days of Twitter. It really does. I don't know how long it's going to stay like this, but it really does have just we're all just people, and we're just there to like talk to people online that, you kind of maybe resonate with. It was just such a great, Twitter used to be so great, RIP to Twitter, but now we're on Blue Sky, and I am anyway. And it's nice, it is really nice, because you can really make friends. Like, I've made real friends on Twitter a long time ago, but that was a real thing. Like, you could really make actual friends on Twitter that I still have, that I still talk to. So I can see that could happen. Like, if you're really online and you're on Blue Sky a lot, like, and you comment on people's stuff, like, you could really very easily make friends on there too. And I think that probably is something that we need. I think, what happened with social media, I don't know if it created the isolation that so many of us are feeling, especially politically, or if it was just a response to it. I don't know, but I just know that now social media is just like a bunch of political horse shit. Like, what I'm on social media for is to, I have a podcast, so I want to get the podcast out so that there's listeners, and that's, fun for me. But I want to talk to people about the stuff that's interesting about them, not the stuff that is polarizing and makes them hateful. And so I will say, like, Blue Sky does seem to be capturing a little bit of that, and it's just really nice. I probably won't talk to you till after the new year, so I am wishing you a very joyful new year, and I hope that you get to have a lot of laughter in the new year and all wonderful things ahead for 2025. Let's pray for the best, and long live Luigi. I think I have to change Luigi's mother's voice. Like, I have to make her voice a little more like this, a little more high, just so that it's different from me, I have to be, so this from Luigi's mother, I gotta do. Oh my Lord Jesus, I think about his mother, Luigi Mangione. Long live Luigi Mangione. I hope we don't find out some horrible, terrible, who knows what's real about any of this? Who cares, really? I just, like that it's sparking a conversation about healthcare. And I really do hope to God, I really do hope it sparks a really important conversation about healthcare in this country that is long overdue. So, all right, God bless. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Happy Hanukkah. Thank you for tuning in, and I will be back. Talk to you soon. Ciao for now. Brown cow. Take care. Brush your hair. Be neat. Brush your teeth.